All right, this is a call to the June RISE Committee. The date is June 25th, the time 6 p.m. We're at Cicada High School, room 35. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And then, Danny, can I get a request, a roll call?
Yes, of course. Helena Snyder,
Here.
Daryl Andrews,
Here.
Nicole Andrews,
Here.
David Cross,
Yeah.
Chelsea Mena,
Here.
Crystal Hone,
Here.
and Addie Zer.
Here.
All right. Okay, so the first, did everybody get a chance to review the agenda and everything? We can go ahead and do some opening remarks. Maggie, do you have anything you want to talk about, or are we going to go right ahead to the discussion for our growth and capacity?
Thanks, Chelsea. Really quickly, I just wanted to say I'll be taking notes from this meeting back to Superintendent Carpenter. He had a scheduling conflict tonight, but we will be making sure he hears everything and is abreast of all the issues that we bring up this evening. I also wanted to say perhaps we should introduce ourselves one more time because we do have one member joining us for the first time. So why don't we go around just really briefly and say our names. I'm Maggie Kelly, the Communications Director for the district.
Helena Snyder.
Daryl Andrews.
Nicole Andrews.
David Cross.
Chelsea Mena.
And I'm Crystal Hahn.
Addie Zer.
Okay, welcome everyone.
All right, so the discussion for the growth and capacity. So the presentation of the roadmap. So we'll go ahead
And I'll speak on this briefly, and then I'll see what questions and feedback you have. Really, we know over the next year, we are going to be very busy at work ensuring that when we implement our growth and capacity plan the following school year, that it is successful, and that is going to take a lot of work and planning and research. But it's going to go in phases, so we really wanted to map out, and of course this is subject to change as things happen, but we really wanted to map out what stage we anticipate that we'll be at each month, just so we can appropriately communicate it to the community. And you'll see on here, we have a little bit of construction that's beginning this summer, just as we start to think about what separating our junior high and high school students might look like. And in September or October, we'll let the beginning of the school year kind of settle in, and then we'll convene a committee of community members and staff members to start talking about some of the hot topics and concerns, especially around parent pickup logistics, curriculum, some of those hot topics that our community really wants to know, okay, what is this going to look like? We want to involve folks in that decision and start to really problem solve together. So that's going to begin probably in October after we've settled into the start of the school year. Then in November and December, we'll have a little bit of a fun, light topic in renaming and branding our schools. We won't have Estacada Middle School anymore. That will be our 5th and 6th grade group. So what does that look like? Does that have its own name? What name do we want for it? So that will begin around that time. We'll start to do some logistics around office placement and things of that nature in January. In February, and March, we'll start to assign classroom teachers to what building they're going to be at, and that is a pretty lengthy process of looking at, okay, what licensure do teachers have? Maybe they are only licensed to teach 6th graders, so they need to go in that 5th and 6th grade group or something along those lines. So those conversations will be happening in February and March. In April, we'll really decide what a 5th and 6th playground will look like and start planning for the implementation of that. We'll do more staffing placements. And then in May and June, we'll really be finalizing things around school start times, bus routing, really some of those later in the game decisions, we'll be putting those in pen. So that is roughly what it looks like, and our plan is to each month put out a monthly communication on where we're at this month, what we're focusing on this month, how our community can get involved, and then a brief FAQ that answers questions about the current phase that we're in, just so our community isn't too overwhelmed but still receives regular updates on this this big change. But, in the background, we'll be running business as usual and keeping school going. So we wanted to have a plan so that it's structured and we're moving forward, but it's not too much of a distraction for the rest of our staff as we continue to educate students at high levels. Any questions? And of course, we're really looking forward to your feedback on what can we do to make sure we're inclusive and communicative and really engaging our community in this. So I'll give you guys the floor.
I had a few questions.
Yeah.
Just from to understand, on stage 2 for the summer, it says Sky program. Just, what is that?
Great question. Our Sky program serves students that are 18 to 21 that have been served by our Student Services Department. They may have special needs. That's it, that 18 to 21 age group. I believe we serve between 15 and 30 students in that group. They have their own classroom, and they have different needs in their classroom. It needs to be very accessible for students with different physical needs. They also practice a lot of life skills, how to do laundry and cook food and things of that nature. So their classroom setting looks a little bit different. So we want to make sure that we have a spot for them in all this change that still meets their needs.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And then no, you go ahead, I already asked a question. Yes, please.
Okay, sorry.
No,
My question was also centered around stage 2. I see the food bank listed, and I was speaking with Bettina yesterday, and she said that the food pantry was going to be closed because of, space needs. So do we have any plans throughout this roadmap of finding a place for that? Because that's such a huge need for our community, and I would hate to see that closed off for a year.
I am so glad you asked that. So we'll be announcing later this month that we will be pausing our food bank for 1 year because we're not using our facilities to their best use right now. The middle school is just too full. They need to convert that into a classroom for next school year. When we implement the growth and capacity plan, we will have room again in that space to reopen it as a food pantry because, to your point, we serve a lot of families through that. And to close it even for a year was a really, really hard decision for us. We looked at every possible place that we could still house it, and there just wasn't a space with the current.
Have we reached out to any of the churches in the community to see if they would be willing to? I know that you feel like that's been decided, but that just seems that gives me big anxiety because we
Yeah.
have a lot of people who really utilize that. That's super important.
I will ask, I completely agree. One thing we have done is we have touched base with the Estacada Food Bank that's in downtown Estacada. We're gonna be providing some support and some resources to them, like reallocating our food and our equipment down there to support them in expanding their hours and their resources so that they can serve people in an expanded capacity while we're closed. But we could also reach out to our faith-based community.
Does that also, sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions.
no.
Does that also include like the clothing that was being donated as well?
Yep, clothing as well. We will probably still be able to maintain a small clothes closet within our schools and just connect with students on an as-needed basis, but it definitely won't be as expansive. We'll also be announcing, when we're announcing the pause of our food pantry, that we won't be accepting any more donations just for this year. And this is, again, a direct consequence of the growing pains. Like, it is painful, and we are so grateful that we get to bring it back the following year because the amount of people we've served with that program has been, like, far exceeded our expectations. So it's painful to close it even for a year. Yeah.
That was my next question, by the way. So that's somebody else.
Good one.
And I guess the only other question I had, and I guess this is for the committee as well, is do you believe or does the district believe that maybe one of us from this committee act as a liaison to, provide feedback to this committee on and how many or one committee that's going to be put together as far as this roadmap is concerned?
I would absolutely recommend that. Once we get the dates finalized of when we're going to start in October, I would love to connect with you, this group, probably in our September meeting, to make sure that we have at least one person that's able to attend those meetings and act as an intermediary, because we're going to have a lot of important discussions in those committees, so we definitely want you at the table. Any other questions?
What construction have they started so far?
We've started some pretty minor construction around looking to relocate. I believe our art classroom, our current art classroom is being relocated because the following summer, that will be turned into the front office space. That's been one of our biggest needs. We feel that students are not as safe as they could be without that office located in the front of the building. So we're relocating the art classroom this summer, and next summer we'll turn it into the front office for our junior high and our high school group.
Sorry, I'm full of questions. I'm just what are
This is
we doing as far as making sure that our parents that don't speak English as a first language is getting all of this information? People that may or may not, utilize the websites and stuff. Like, what are we doing to make sure that people are being aware of what the process is every step of the way?
Great question. For our, in particular, our Spanish-speaking community, that's our largest non-English-speaking community, we have a parent meeting that meets every month, and it's really widely attended. Like, we have pretty tremendous attendance on that, and this has been the dominant topic of conversation for many months. And our translators and interpreters call, text, are in constant communication with our Spanish-speaking families to make sure that they are aware of what's going on and have collected their feedback in this decision-making process as well. In terms of folks that aren't as connected, maybe not checking their emails, that's a harder one, and we're really open to your feedback. We try some alternate methods of communication. We do send out mailers in the mail sometimes. We do Facebook Lives for those folks that are on social media. But if you have suggestions of other ways that we could be connecting with folks that are different than the traditional parent square or email, we're all ears. We're always looking to try something new.
I don't know how it works now, but I know when I was in high school, Todos Juntos, as an organization, helped spread English, Spanish
Yeah.
flyers to parents. Do you know if they still do that, or do you have any idea if they still do that?
We still have Todos Juntos that's been operating. I will have to touch base with their director on whether or not usually they circulate our flyers also, but I'll
Okay.
touch base and see even just how they're feeling on
Yeah.
growth
'cause
and
they
capacity and up to date. That's a really good point.
I don't know if the local, you're asking for, ways of communicating. I still look at the newspaper, flip the paper, and get it every week. I don't know if that's a means that we want to consider starting to communicate that way in case it might just reach that small audience that we aren't seeing too. I really don't know, but that's something that just popped in my head.
That's a good one. We've purchased some ad space next year, and we will be providing monthly updates on this in that ad space within the newspaper. And I would love feedback. If you're talking to community members and they say, hey, I saw it in the newspaper, I would love to get that feedback, because it is, when we send out emails, I can see how many people have opened an email, but it's a little bit harder to gauge with the newspaper. So that's where your feedback will really be helpful on whether or not that's an effective tool. But we're willing to try everything. Yeah.
I'd just like to highlight the ease of regular mail. I do have a neighbor in my community who has a second grader in the school district who does not do any digital communication whatsoever.
Yeah.
I don't know that he even has a telephone. So if we could get a mailer out in the mail, I know it's pretty old school and a lot of us are digital now, but I know at least one person who's really affected by this for the next 10, 15 years, who does not do any digital communication, so.
Yeah, that's real. That's a really good note. We're definitely gonna commit to that next year, and also sending, maybe not with the older students, but with the littles, they still go home with stuff in their folders, and I think that's an important one that we're gonna make sure we're putting things in students' folders home, at least for our elementary age students. Yeah, that's a good note. Okay, anything else on this? And we will be, of course, revisiting this every single month, so this is not the last time you'll hear about this for a while. In August, things will start heating up again, so we'll definitely revisit.
Have we, or has the school board thought about where they're gonna place the junior hires here in the high school yet? Is that part of?
Yeah, great
this?
question. We're tentatively thinking this side of the building for a couple of reasons. The number of classrooms that are required, we've done so much math on the number of classrooms that the 7th and 8th graders are gonna need versus these students. And we want them also to have separate bathrooms and to make sure they're crossing paths as little as possible. And that side, there's two hallways in particular that we can really mostly separate our 7th and 8th graders into and have them not cross paths with our older students. So it's going to be on this side. We've been hesitant in releasing an actual map of our building just for safety reasons. We don't like to release blueprints of our buildings, but we will be letting families know what side of the building. So that left side is where they're gonna be located.
The science hallways and stuff like
Yep.
that down there.
Yep, exactly.
So with the, I know last meeting we were talking about the common area, and you guys were thinking about converting the library to the junior high common area.
Yep.
Where would we locate, so would we locate the library then where the office is now?
The library is, so.
Or where is the library somewhere different?
We're gonna do, it's going to be a mix. It's a pretty
Okay.
large space that hasn't been utilized super well, so we think that we can have it be a commons area for them and still have our library space. We just won't allow our 9th through 12th graders to have access to the library during their lunchtime.
Oh.
Yeah. But we're really looking forward to this summer getting architects in there and seeing what the space visually will look like.
Do we have plans to do a tour video like we did before the bond, so that parents get the opportunity to visually see it without necessarily have to bring, or maybe even bringing them in so that they could see it if they wanted to? Because I know that was, for me, looking at the bond was huge.
Yeah.
Because with younger kids, I hadn't really been inside of the high school. But then knowing that I've got going into the 7th grade, that's coming up really quick. I'd like to know what that's going to look like for him. And I'm sure a lot of other parents are, trying to figure that out and would like to see it once you guys have that kind of, further planned out.
That's a fantastic idea. Yeah, we definitely plan to have open houses where we'll invite families in person, but having a video is absolutely something we can commit to because not everyone can make it in person, and we can do that proactively. So thank you. That is a great suggestion. We heard some good feedback that those tour videos were effective. So yeah, let's do that.
I apologize for not being here at the last committee meeting, and maybe my questions are already answered, but based on the housing projections and building in the area in the school district and this change, how long is this projected to cover the growth?
That is a really great question. So by 2030, the year 2030, we anticipate that each of our buildings will be at capacity. No matter how you distribute the students, we will be at full capacity. So at that point, if we have not passed a bond by then, we will either do more portables, increase our class sizes, or a combination.
And with the changes coming that are projected now, are we increasing any classrooms and teachers, or are we just relocating everybody that we already have?
Really good question. We hire new we have for the past couple of years hired new teachers every year. Usually it comes with that kindergarten group. We see how many kindergartners we are going to have come in, and then we have what's called a vapor position in our budget where we see, we had a lot more kindergartners come in than we anticipated. We're going to hire an additional kindergarten teacher. So we've done that, I believe, the past two years, and we can definitely continue to do that. We are committed to a class size ratio of 25-1 at the elementary level and 30-1 at the high school level. So we'll hire staff to ensure that we keep that ratio.
Thank you.
Yeah, great questions.
To backtrack just a little bit, before it slipped my mind, I don't know if the school board would have really anything to do with this or not, but when the city decided to do the growth and capacity and build all these homes, do we know if it was ever on the table to ask the builders to help support the bond? Because they're putting the housing in our communities, and they're building, I mean, thousands and thousands of houses. At what price could they have taken a percentage to help support our schools for all of these people they want to move to our area?
Yeah, great question. We get that one a lot. It's not standard. The way that builders help fund community development is through the construction excise tax. So we get $1 per square foot that is built in our community. So if you build a 2,000 square foot home, for example, we're getting $2,000 in construction excise tax. So that's how builders help fund the infrastructure that is needed in our community. In past years, we've gotten anything from $100,000 a year to $400,000 a year, I think was our highest year, which is, it's helpful, but it's not enough. There are limitations on how much we can tax builders. So we could increase the construction excise tax, but not, I think the limit, don't quote me on this, but I think the limit is $1.25 or something like that. So we have a limit on how much we can ask of them, and even if we were to ask the maximum, it would not be enough to build a new school. Estacada has the lowest tax rate in the Portland metro area by, I mean, it's like multiple times smaller than other communities around, and that's why we face the facility issues that we do.
Say something, is there, you guys have plans on maybe educating the community about the projections if we don't pass the bond, and maybe educating them on how low our taxes is compared to other places?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an ongoing conversation. We did some of that with the bond, but I think it's a very in-depth conversation. I think as they start to see the pain of our schools start to reach capacity, that it will be illustrated to folks that this really is necessary. But we will definitely continue to communicate how low our taxes are and how schools are funded. And if you have any feedback or suggestions on that, we are all ears, because we really do need to continue the community education.
Again, I think during that time, if you do get back to a bond, I think one thing that might help if you guys had held, I don't know if you did this already, maybe I'm wrong, some town halls where you're talking about the, some of these things, and then actually letting people communicate why they're nervous on doing this.
Yeah.
And then, letting them know why it's important. I mean, because like I said, just two meetings, I've seen how important this is, that we're kind of putting a Band-Aid on a very bad wound that
Yeah.
this community has.
Yeah, I agree that the two-way conversation is probably the most effective way to make people understand our needs. We hosted several town halls during the bond campaign and didn't have great attendance, but it does come back to how could we communicate that more? How could we encourage people to attend? How can we make them more accessible to people? I think having community members like you out there inviting people and encouraging your neighbors to attend would be helpful, because we can send a piece of mail, but they can, you get a lot of mail, so sometimes it gets ignored, but having a community member say, hey, you should really attend this, I think can be really impactful.
I think a lot of it is, I'm sorry.
No, please, go.
Tying it to things that they have to be at the schools for. Like back to school night, the teacher night, conferences, things that everybody's going to show up for, just so that you can get them in the door and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Because one of the things me and my husband have been talking about is that the longer this goes, the more expensive it gets. And so we're not really doing ourselves any favors by continuing to wait. This is something that it's going to have to happen. And so just trying to get that point across that, hey, this is temporary. This isn't permanent. And the longer that we do wait, the more expensive it's going to be for you, and the less things we can do for our kids. And that's really important.
Yeah. it's a
Yeah,
really
we have
good
a
point.
large community that has also been here for a long time. And that's what I was on the political action committee for the bond as well. And we struggled communicating and educating that group as well. And we went knocking on doors and having great conversations with those in the neighborhoods too about the bond. So I agree with you with getting the people in the doors, but we also have community out there that won't be ever coming in the doors anymore. So we have to balance both of that.
Let's say maybe we change the audience, you know, try to, maybe push it at school where the kids are, you know, kind of get into that and say, oh, yeah, it would be nice if I had a smaller classroom and we don't have to do all this moving. Just might have to change the audience or definitely go more digital. Again, I know you said you had someone that doesn't do the digital, but a little bit more digital. And again, I might have missed some stuff where I'm sure you guys did everything, but I see how it's very important that this bond gets passed.
Yeah, we're absolutely welcome to more feedback, and I think doing more in those times where people are already in our facilities, like at football games, at graduation events, times when we already have people in the door, really capitalizing on those events.
Maybe
is
even
critical.
Oktoberfest, you know, things like that,
yeah.
the concerts in the park, so that we can get some of the group that she's talking about that's not coming in the doors, and just kind of, not necessarily cornering people, but just saying, hey, you know, this is what's going on in our schools, maybe having pictures of the outdated facilities, because maybe people just haven't seen them and they don't understand how critical we are, because we're really at a critical place, and, you know, this is great. I think this is gonna be a great in-between time, but we've got to get something done, you know, for long-term purposes.
And I noticed that a lot of people like baseball here. We could probably utilize that. I mean, because that corner over there, you can barely get to it sometimes. Baseball, maybe something, the sports, where you get a lot of people.
Yeah.
Start advertising.
Yeah, Maggie, you've probably heard the term before, but in this kind of situation, what I believe we need is what's known as a public awareness campaign. And I've worked on a couple of these in the past, and the people who are not buying into this are not going to buy into it unless we establish a relationship with them. And I would say that we probably have a 3 to 4 year public awareness campaign ahead of us for this. And, you know, there was a thing we always say in direct response marketing, which is my background, that if people refund a product, they refund the product. But the thing they can't refund is a relationship. So if you establish a relationship with the person, it's very difficult for them to refund a relationship. And so what I would propose is that we get a list of the yay-sayers, everyone in this room plus everyone we know, and we have a meeting of all those people, and we discuss how to do a public awareness campaign, and then we split that larger group into individuals who each say take on 10 people, 10 of their neighbors, which we can get from the electoral register. And we just go through that list and we individually contact those people and have discussions with them, go out for coffee with them, go and knock on their door, have the discussion and establish those relationships. And then over time, 2 to 3 years, that kind of thing is the thing that will establish the relationship, where when the bond is next up there, they don't think this is a tax. They think this is a relationship with David. This is a relationship with my neighbor. And so they become emotionally vested in the reason for the bond in the first place. I think that's what we have ahead of us here. I mean, you, by the way, you do mean accosting people at these events. You just do it in a nice way.
In a very nice.
Would you like a cookie? And by the way, could I just mention something to you? But it needs to be on that really grassroots level. And if we want to avoid what could happen in 2030, where we become overcapacity, that's how these public awareness campaigns tend to work. It is a huge undertaking if we want a yes from the next bond. We got to break it down into small chunks and work on the relationships. And I'm happy to lend my expertise of those types of campaigns to this, but I believe that's what we need.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I
And
think
then-
to your point, this is going to be a long-term effort
Yep.
to get our community to understand the need. Yeah.
And I think the new way you guys are doing it, I think that things that don't work should probably be communicated to the community. You know, maybe catching a mom who's having to pick up 3 people at the same time. And just kind of maybe having some stories from people in the community on how this is, you know, a discomfort, you know, also. And I have to say, well, you have to get permission from the parents, but even students on, you know, even being separated, again, I understand, from the big kids, but then it's like, what's going on? Why we gotta be separated and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And sometimes high school is a big jump for 7th and 8th graders. You usually have to get yourself prepared for it. And so, and then just like 7th, 8th, they're gonna be put right into it, you know.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of access we have, but do we know what % of the active voters for the last school bond have children in the school district and how many don't?
Great question. We did look at that. It's been a while, so I'm a little rusty. So I'll cross-reference with Danny. I believe it was around 20-something
Yeah.
percent.
16 in my
So,
head.
okay, that number it sounds more
I have
familiar, 16%
16%.
sounds.
So 16% of the active voters on the bond have kids here.
That were associated as a adult associated with a student that was currently enrolled.
Okay,
It's
so-
very low, and that's
So
one thing
that's-
that's unusual about our community. There's a
Yeah.
lot of older voters.
So, I mean, when I'm hearing, you know, public awareness campaigns, I think we really should be targeting definitely the that other 84%.
Yep,
Exactly.
absolutely.
And really getting in with them and how, you said, I heard voter registry, so if we have access to that kind of thing. On the school bond, how long was it proposed if the bond had passed before we could have those buildings or the plan in place? Because
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, with this 2030 max, when do we need to have a new school bond passed or, you know, in order to have the needs met by 2030?
Really great question. It depends on what construction we commit to, but usually 2 or 3 school years it will take
Okay.
to have, like, if we were to build a high school, you're looking at about 3 years. If we were to commit to something a little bit less ambitious, maybe 2 years.
Okay. So really, it sounds like we have about 2 years to do public awareness and get a bond out, get it passed, and get started, so we can have a smooth transition around 2030.
Yeah.
My other question is, after the bond fail on the vote, have we had any contact with any of, I don't know if we can see like who literally voted yes or no? I don't know if we can see that anywhere, as we can't, okay.
We can see who voted. We can't see who voted yes or no. No.
Okay. Just wondering what it was specifically that they didn't like about the bond.
I will
Was it-
say, we conducted a poll after the bond failed, because we were looking at going out for a bond for less money, because that was some feedback that we got was just too expensive, have a smaller size of request. And so we put out a poll on whether or not the community would support a no tax increase bond, which still would have helped, and we didn't get majority support on that either. So we've gotten some mixed messages on what the real point of concern is. I think there's some folks that aren't supportive of any increase in taxes or any taxes. It's tough.
I want to say, so that was good information on the 84% didn't have kids. So it sounds like 84% need some type of incentive to do that, because most people, we're selfish by nature. If my kid's not in there, why should I pay more for somebody else's kid?
Yeah.
So, I mean, without knowing everything or who said yes or no, I mean, that's a big thing that sticks out is that 84% don't have.
It's of no
So we're-
benefit to
Yeah,
them.
no benefit. I was gonna say a dog in the race.
So were these elderly people or single people?
It was Estacada.
I,
No, seriously.
I have
just-
something
I'm
to
just
add in
curious.
regards to it,
Yeah.
because I'm a local here. I was born and raised, went to high school, elementary school, everything, so I've talked to the community about this. It was misinterpreted to them. They assumed it was going to be an 8% on top of whatever they already had increase of their taxes.
And it probably was. It could have been.
They didn't want that. And then, like, the majority, like my age group, I mean, late 20s, early 30s, like a lot of, like this school district, it was not as good as it is now at one point. So a lot of people have tarnished relationships with this school board and that people that run it. And that's just the hard truth. It's regaining trust with this administration here at the school board, with the community members that feel like they failed them. And now all of a sudden, they're this big school and they want all this crazy fancy stuff. Well, how come I had to go to high school in 2012 with a building that was built in the 70s that my mom graduated from? You know, I didn't have air conditioner in high school when I went through there. So there's tarnished relationships and selfishness in regards to some of the people. And not everybody has people in, like, kids in school. And like me, like, I even had a meeting with Maggie personally, and I even had apologized because as I was in the first meeting, it came to like my mind of, I guess I was more clear on exactly what the bond meant. Because all I remember getting is a little like postcard in the mail with this like fancy school on it, and it said $2 million. And I was like, screw you guys, like, I just graduated 10 years ago, and now you want to build a $2 million school? So that was the mentality of like my peer group and the people around us. And like my sister, my stepsister, she has grandparents that have lived here, and they live, you know, up rural Estacada. They don't have, their last grandchild graduated in 2017, like out of sight, out of mind. You know, they see it, they're like, oh, okay. Like, and we don't have kids in school yet, so they don't have grandchildren in school. So it's kind of, and I think having people that are not transplanted here, because this community for some reason has such a negative outlook on having more people come here. They want, you know, the rural small town. It's getting too big. We don't like it. Too many Portlanders, you know, those things are said. That's what they're talking about. Not everybody agrees with it. I don't. I love it. I think it's fun. I've met a lot of really nice people the last year. But that's what the community thinks. And that's just, I think having locals and people that have lived here longer, telling other people that don't have kids, even at a local bar, the summer celebration, like even now that I'm more involved, I know more than I had even known in the last 10 years, even when I was in school. And it's eye-opening and almost a little embarrassing, like how come I wasn't even involved like in voting back then? Like how come I didn't like have interest in it at that point? And how do I change my peers to have interest in it that I do now? And I think just word of mouth and like talking and being like, it's not just, you know, Portlanders, it's my kids too. It's everybody. And who cares where people are from, what they look like, or who they are? As long as our kids are supported here and are better off than when we were, I feel like, what's the problem? If you had a bad experience, make it better for somebody else, right? And I think just saying that, like if you're out at the Cazadero or something, you know, say something to somebody. If you're going to lose, I think like doing it like that, not necessarily like a campaign, because I think that might have a negative effect on the community, honestly.
Well, to everybody's point, as I was listening to you guys, I think one of the things our community and our school district can benefit from is mentorship. Getting some of these elderly people, these people who don't have kids, to come in and build the relationship, like what you were talking about. Because I read a while back about a school district, theirs was particularly about getting grandparents to come in and build these relationships with these younger kids. And so I know Bettina had mentioned she was really interested in doing mentorship. And that's one of the things that I love to do. I'm huge on that. And I think that could be so powerful, especially when you get to the campaign process and you have these powerful stories of these relationships that have been built that you can share, and these kids and these adults that can say, we want this for the people that mean this much to us.
Yeah, and I would say I understand about campaigns, but sometimes you gotta do the dirty work before you get to the campaign. And I'm thinking that sending questionnaires, I even sending something saying, what did you have a problem with the last bond? Getting people's feedback and finding out why they had a problem with it. And I think when a person is able to express how they feel, then they feel a part of something. And like you said, having a two-way conversation. But again, I don't mean to keep harping on it, but that bond is really, everything that we're talking is just coming back, yeah, we should have passed that bond. But
Does
I just
any-
think, you don't want people to think that, let me see how I say this, the fat cats are getting richer. And so when you send a picture of a $2 million building, they're gonna say, why does it have to be 2 billion? Oh, 2 million, did you say 2 million?
I don't know what it was. Yeah. It was something, and I was like, oh,
Hypothetical.
whatever.
But if you start putting money in instead of maybe having studies where smaller classrooms benefit, the state of art buildings, how it benefit the learning, how it produce learning, certain colors in the room, what they do, different things like that. I think if you do a campaign like that where you're putting out evidence, and again, me as a nurse, we usually go by evidence-based practice. So if you're producing the evidence that others are having success with, you may have, I can't always get my words out.
Be able to adapt it to other
Yes,
situations.
you may be able to, this time get it passed, like I said, adapt. But the 84% seem like, have you guys even, I felt like the 84% should have been worked on as soon as the bond got denied. Have anybody even started working on that 84%? Because if they didn't, we're behind.
I mean, we continuously do outreach. We did, a lot of physical mailers. We show up at community center dinners and dances. Particularly the elderly population, like a lot of people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s really turn out to vote, and we struggle to find ways to organically reach them. I mean, we're willing to put a table out in front of the trails and talk to people in the evening. Like, we're willing to do whatever, but we do struggle to reach, particularly, if you're a 75-year-old that lives in Eagle Creek, you probably don't come into Estacada very often. We struggle with ways to reach those type of voters, and those are the type of voters that we do need to convince. We run Google ads, we run YouTube ads, we run Facebook ads. We have tried.
I have one more point before we move on to the survey. We should look into maybe hosting or like doing an informational at some of our granges or like the moose lodges to get to like reach out to those communities, because that's where our population of those members are usually.
Yeah.
Grange or Moose Lodge, but we should definitely move on to next topic and the student health survey results.
Yeah, I know this is very lengthy, and David was such a great asset, and he did a little breakdown of some of the data in this health survey, but I wanted to highlight a couple of key topics that either were encouraging or concerning to us, and then answer any questions and just have a discussion on where we as a district and as a committee can work on this data, because we are a data-driven district. A few good things that we saw is that student marijuana and alcohol use is around the state average. We don't stand out in any way. We're around average there. We'd always like to get that number lower. Bullying Estacada was at 8%, and the state average is 14%. Again, we always want that to be 0. But the fact that in bullying we are lower than the state average is something that we've been really intentionally working on over the past few years. So it's great to see that we are having an impact there, even though we have a long way to go. Some things that were really concerning to us were the state of student mental health. Like a lot of students saying that they are stressed, that they have high levels of anxiety. The number of students that have considered suicide in Estacada was around 13%. The state average is 11%. That's scary. You'll see both in here and in the summary that David provided, students say that they don't feel like they have enough resources around their health and access to care, which is unsurprising knowing that we're in a rural area, but something that is worrying to us. So those are really things that stood out. And then also a really inclusive climate where all students feel welcomed. Students indicated low levels on that as well. So those are highlights of things that we really want to be intentional about and focusing on over the next year. And I really wanted to see what stands out to you, what takeaways you had, and where you think, I mean, we have some ideas as a district on some areas that we can continue to work to support students, but we'd love to get your feedback as well on where can we move from here with this data?
I was gonna say, your bullying data and the stress and suicide just is, to me, off, because they kind of go hand in hand. I know that there's a lot of bullying going over at that school, and at the different schools. And I can tell you, elementary, and especially where my son is at the middle school. How are you getting the bully numbers? Because that don't sound.
Well, I know
This is just
just
11th
research,
graders.
it's always
This is just 11th
underreported.
graders.
Okay.
It's
So-
always underreported.
Yeah.
And so just knowing that, yes, those are the numbers, but you're gonna have to know that it's more than that.
And there's a stat at the back where we asked them how honest they were on the survey.
That was, I asked my son about that, by the way.
And 85% said they were very honest.
Well, wait.
So these numbers, you do have to take them with a grain of salt. There are some students that are not going to be truthful. We only survey 11th graders. Students have the option to opt out. If they say, hey, I'm not comfortable, we're not going to force them to take the survey. So it's helpful data, but it is taken with a grain of salt. And this is only our 11th
How much
graders.
education are they getting before they take this survey? Because what I'm noticing, even with the bond, people are not getting a lot of education before they take something.
Great question. Our teachers have a conversation with them before, and they say, here's what this is. It's completely anonymous. We don't have any way to track you. Like, you're not writing anything handwritten. We can't do a handwriting analysis to figure out who you are. This is completely anonymous. Here's how we use the data. It helps us improve. It helps us serve you better. You can take the whole thing. You can take none of it. You can skip certain questions if you feel uncomfortable, but it's anonymous. It really helps us serve you better. And you can skip anything that makes you super uncomfortable. We've even had kids ask the teacher before, hey, what does this mean? I think there's a question about psilocybin. What does that mean? And a teacher can offer clarity. So we do try and really educate them on it, and we send home information to parents too, because parents can opt their children out of it. We do have a relatively low opt-out rate, but sometimes families do have concerns around their students taking the survey, but it's
I'll be
helpful
honest,
data.
I don't remember getting the notification, and I have an 11th grader.
There's a
But-
lot of notifications
Yeah, there's a
that
lot,
go
I
out.
agree,
Yeah.
I agree.
The trouble is, if someone is being bullied or abused, even if they take the survey, I guarantee that they will not report accurately, because that makes them, expressing it alone creates a sense of vulnerability. And if they don't feel emotionally safe, they won't venture. And so I think that the tip of the iceberg on things like bullying, but like listening to my own kids and their friends talk, one big thing that came up was that there's nothing to do after school in Estacada. And they all love going to the games club, but the games club is not about the games, it's about the connectedness. And I think that a lot of the negative data points in here speak to the lack of connectedness. And although social media is hugely popular and children look so much to their screen, that's actually an indicator of a disconnect, Because social media doesn't create a human bond. It simply creates that kind of incessant validate me. And I think what that is actually an indicator of is, if you put it all together, it's the need for some sort of extracurricular community that the children can feel part of and contribute to, that fosters genuine human relationships, and that also isn't kind of cliquey that, oh, it's only the cool kids that go there. So have you ever read a book called Quiet? Is it Quiet or Calm? I can't remember now. It's about basically the power of introversion, and that very often, I'll get you the Zoom link, the TED Talk link, and I'll send it out. It was one of Bill Gates' favorite books, and this author gave a talk about the power of introversion, and that in a social setting, in a classroom and stuff, it's very often the extroverts that will say, oh, I know the answer to that, but the introverts will not venture an answer, but they still want to feel connected. And I think there's a lot we can learn from this in terms of the results of this study, is that there's a lot of people who may be in a very difficult space who don't feel emotionally safe, but then listening to my children's friends when they're talking in their private groups and stuff, or having dinner at our home, just the things they mentioned point to that lack of inclusive community, which is what our purpose is, after school, and that those groups would filter into school. So I think it's about connectedness that this all speaks to.
Are you-
Great connectedness.
Are you thinking of, and I'm going back to, like, for example, when we had one of our kids that was in like a chess club after school. Are you thinking like their after-school
Those
clubs?
types of things.
Okay. No, I
We don't have
agree with
any
you.
of those right now?
We have some, but it's not as much as it probably could be.
Yeah. I also think because we are a rural community where some other communities have like thriving parks and recs districts and YMCA and Boys and Girls Club, we don't have that in this area. We don't have movie theaters and bowling alleys. So the onus and responsibility really is on the district and district partners like Todos Juntos and Ant Farm to create these things, because there just isn't that infrastructure.
When I was in high
I was
school,
gonna say, it was
we
very
actually,
short-lived,
yeah,
but
go
in
for
middle
it.
school, we had, it's an empty space now, but between Figaro's and the dentist was a building that we called the Cone.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
It was open after school until I want to say like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And there were video games,
Just go there and hang out with your friends.
chips, hot dogs
Yeah,
for
snacks.
like $1, things to do. And with all sports opening up, is there anything that we can do to partner with them? to
Well, they
maybe
do a
have,
lot of
like,
the
an
middle school
after-
dances this year. They've taken on that, but I do think we could maybe see if we could
Yeah,
partner with them a little bit
And I know it's,
more.
far, so like maybe something the district can like,
I
put
kn-
kids
yeah.
over there.
The
you know, after
owners
school.
of All in Sports have kids that go to our district, so I think
Like,
that would be,
Yeah.
Like a shuttle bus or something
Yeah,
along
like for
those lines.
Kids who have, want
Yeah.
to go play sports or video games, or whatever
Yeah.
they have there, I don't know. I've never
And
been
just
there.
in the inclusive part, more sports that kids with special needs can participate in. Because my daughter, she can't do much, and I did speak with the principal over at River Mill about trying to do Girls on the Run, Oregon, because she can run. But because they need an alternate indoor space, they said that they couldn't agree to it. And that really sucked, because it is such an awesome program, because not only are they doing the sport aspect of it, they focus on confidence and self-esteem and things that girls really need at that age, because it starts at like 3rd grade to 5th grade. And so just knowing that we need more things, and things that don't cost like ridiculous amounts of money, because club sports are expensive. We have 4 kids, we have 2 in sports, and we're getting slammed. And so just having things that maybe they could do through the district that are free, or, you know, have a minimal amount, that would be super important, I think.
That book is called Quiet, The Power of Introverts, by a woman called Susan Cain, C-A-I-N. She gave a TED Talk. It's a brilliant talk and book.
Can you say it one more time?
Quiet, The Power of Introverts. Well, it's actually Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, by Susan Cain, C-A-I-N.
Have we asked, I know, right when I was out of high school, I was a softball player here. So, I actually coached for, Milwaukee High School for a little bit, and I really liked it, and I was just kind of too far, so I came back here and I volunteered with the softball team. Just like did a background check and, emailed it in, and I was able to like go to the games and do all of that. Do we still like do that for the community, like volunteers? And I know coaches will have the summers off, so I'm wondering if like some of the volunteers, if they wanted to do like a summer practice throughout the month of, because summer's what, a month now? I mean,
Coaches
throughout
are
the
already
month,
doing
like,
fall
you know,
sport practices,
things,
if
like
that's what you're
things like
thinking.
other volunteers. Like, I mean, I would be interested in that. I think that would be fun. I like teaching kids, and I love softball, and I like our community, and I think like things like that just. I mean, I wouldn't even want to be paid for it. I would just do it because I liked it, like volunteer-based things.
I think, and Danny can speak to that because she's volunteered in our athletics, so they are pretty robust and they do have a lot of opportunities. One thing I think that is a really good point, though, is I think we could do a better job as a community soliciting volunteers from people that aren't just our parents that are already probably tapped out doing PTA and taking care of their own kids, and people that maybe do have more free time, doing a better job of letting them know what volunteer opportunities
There's
there
what we
are.
can do, the 86%.
There you go.
Is we can involve them to coach people.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
right there with you.
Even we
Yeah.
could do, I mean, we can utilize Timber Park or even the fields out here to do like a pickup game, or even like baseball versus softball one day, like get it fun, like, and then you have all of the parents from softball and baseball, or even soccer, boys against girls, like stuff like that is fun. Like we used to do stuff like, like volleyball games where the boys dressed up like volleyball players and like girls, and we did fun stuff like that, and I don't know.
Chess club is another good thing that doesn't have to be physically based. It can be cerebral as
Yeah.
well, or public
Or even
speaking.
debate,
The
like-
debates. There's many
I will
things.
say, my son is involved in the basketball,
Just the Estacada Youth.
the Estacada Youth.
Mhm.
And he's doing that this summer, and that's really helping him.
That's awesome. I like.
So they do have some programs, but it might need to be
Well, with
more
the-
robust.
Does the district provide any like scholarships to do these community-based programs? Because I see a lot of kids that are interested, but their parents can't afford it, because I think that was like $2-something that we paid for the season.
Yeah, for the
Yeah,
season, but in
and
the
so
summer is
for a lot of family, I mean, but that's just for the clinics.
You're right.
So for a lot of families, that's a huge commitment, a financial commitment, especially when you start getting to having multiple kids, and we're getting ready to do back to school, so we're trying to do school supplies. And so just thinking about ways that our district can support, our families that are below the income, because we have a lot of those. And, when you start thinking about these kids going into high school and wanting to, have these things on their college application, it gets really scary to me that they might not have those experiences that other kids are afforded. And then
I can speak to a little bit with regards to that. Just to help, I guess, too, from an education standpoint. I was the president of the youth soccer for a handful of years, and we do promote and offer scholarships, and I believe that a lot of the youth programs do that as well. And we tried to promote it as much as we could, and maybe the promotion, just, the communication on that isn't that great, but I believe that all the other youth programs do the same. The clinic is from the high school level, so that's a lot different, but I believe that, if there was a family in need, I'm sure that coach would probably try to find a way
Could
to
we
help with
poll,
that.
could we poll all the children and say, is there a club that you would like to set up? And just ask and get a representative sample. Like if 3 people want to do, I don't know, underwater basket weaving, and there's someone in the community that knows how to do that.
Let's go ahead and table this for next and move on to the emails and next steps because we're at time.
Can I just jump in
Yes.
really quick, just to jump back to a
Yes.
couple of the things that were mentioned during that I'd like to provide a little information on.
Of
We
course.
are always welcome to anybody volunteering at any of our buildings. You do have to come in and fill out a background check that needs to be approved, and then, of course, you'll any community members are willing to come in and provide, whether it's reading to a child or listening to them read, grading papers, stuffing folders, making copies, all staff members are really open to that. So I would just want to put that out to any community members that may be listening. And then if there ever is a situation where funding for athletics or anything of that nature is a problem and it isn't being met by a community program like the youth softball or baseball or whatever, Bettina Bowles is our district social worker, and there is a means to always put in a request for help that the district then can come back and do whatever support we can provide at that time. So just all of this I'm taking notes on so that we can move forward and bringing it up in other spaces so that we're making sure and addressing this. But those are just little tidbits if somebody's listening and they're interested.
Just make sure you let somebody know if you're needing assistance,
And-
basically.
and
Just communicate
it
it to the,
is.
to
Communication
people.
is the key.
Yeah.
Communication is key for
Literally.
most of everything we've talked about today. Yeah.
And Bettina Bowles does a really good job connecting with folks on a case-to-case basis. I also, if anyone's watching this, want to encourage folks to fill out our free and reduced lunch form. Next year, we're going to free for all, which is exciting.
Yeah.
So lunch will be free for all. So that kind of lowers the motivation to fill that out, but you also get reduced sports fees, activity fees, all the
Okay.
fees are reduced. So sometimes people don't fill it out just because they say, well, my kid doesn't eat lunch, but it really does help reduce the
Okay.
fees if you qualify. And they've moved that barrier up, so a lot of people do qualify now. So we really are trying to get the word out to families to encourage them to apply for that. That's a big resource.
Before we move on, can I just ask one quick question? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This data that we've collected from this survey, what exactly does it do for the district besides us being able to know what's going on? Like, does this go to getting any type of funding or grants? Does this get us another social worker position? What exactly does this data do for us?
Great question. It's not like the state sees that we have a concerning data point and allots us more money, but we can track the change over time. And if from one year to the next, we saw a huge spike in our suicidal behavior, for example, that would alert us to, do we need to hire more social workers? Do we need to make our student health clinic more accessible? Like, do we need to change our budget allocations to support an increase in data? So being able to track the change year over year allows us to be more responsive. And since COVID, really, we have seen an increase in a lot of concerns around mental health. And that has been a huge motivating factor, and we've added in a lot more school counselors. Our school social worker is a new position in the last few years. So we really do put more money towards this as we see concerns coming up, and we wouldn't know unless we collected the data, so.
Do we have plans on adding a second one? Because Bettina seems like she's working super hard.
It is something that we have had discussions around. At this point, we think her caseload has been sustainable so far, and we're working through it with the counselors, but it is, as we continue to grow, a conversation that we have been having.
Alrighty, so the emails, I got my email. I don't know if everybody else received their email to set up their district.
It was today, right?
Oh, was it
So-
today?
so-
Oh, I thought I got mine
Mine's
yesterday.
yesterday.
Yeah,
Maybe
yesterday, okay.
Okay, so.
I was like, do I need this set up before or no?
If you have any questions or struggles with that, let us know. But we are subject to public records requests, so if a community member wants to see all of our emails, we're committed to open honesty and transparency, and we would much rather pull a public record from your committee email than from your personal email. So we'd really encourage you to use that email when communicating with us, communicating with community members. We'll also put your email on our committee website so that community members can reach out to you, because I do think you being a resource to your local community is going to be great, and we're excited to use that. So if you have any questions or issues with the email, please let us know. I will also be sending you Google Calendar invites for the rest of the meetings for the whole next school year. And a quick administrative note on that, it's the fourth Wednesday of every month, except for in December, that falls on December 24th. So we will probably be skipping that meeting unless something really urgent pops up and we want to reschedule it to another week in the month. But that's kind of the administrivia there. Does anyone have any questions on the logistics of that? Okay.
Alrighty, any closing remarks or questions related to the meeting at all today?
Lively discussion.
Right? All right, this meeting is adjourned.